Welcome to the Abraham Factor Super Sessions, recorded live in Anaheim, California, May 6th through the 8th, 2006, featuring internationally respected marketing expert Jay Abraham. One of Jay Abraham's featured guests, Gordon Bazar, presents Business Wealth Your Way.
Thank you, Jay. Good evening. I'm going to try that one more time. Good evening. Good evening. Well, thank you. That makes me feel a whole lot better. One of the things that I like to do, because I work best that way, is to put myself in a room full of entrepreneurs. And so the first question that I'd like to ask you is, and I want you to just give me a show of hands, how many people here in the room see themselves as an entrepreneur? Can I just see a show of hands? Okay. Now I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. That's great. A couple of questions. All right. There's a gentleman right over here that raised your hand. What business are you in? Consulting. Okay. Somebody else who raised their hand right over here. What business are you in? Mortgage. The thing I would like you to just kind of take a note of for just a moment, when somebody asks you what business you're in, most of you would respond, I manufacture this, I distribute that, and yet I would like to assure you this evening, unequivocally, that none of you are in the business you think you're in. It may be the vehicle through which you make money, but it's not your business. The business that every single person here in this room tonight is in, and you're all in the same business, you are on the business of leveraging yourself through other people. That is your business. And what is your business? If leveraging yourself through other people, if that's your business, then what's your inventory? People. Okay? Because people have everything you want, and they will give it to you if you will give them what they want. And I'm going to give you a new definition of an entrepreneur. And this is how, when somebody asks you what business you're in, this is how I'd like you to see yourself. I'm in the people business. I'm an entrepreneur. And what an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur is a person with a vision who orchestrates the resources of other people to fulfill their vision. So as an entrepreneur, what are you? You're a person with a vision who orchestrates the time, talent, money, resources of other people to make your vision real. That's what you are. And everything else is stuff. It's the tools of the trade. That's what you are, and that's what you do. Now, you may have chosen a field to do it in. You may have chosen a specific vehicle to do it in. But that's the business that you're in. Now, why is this important? The most important lesson I ever learned in life is that I am a microbe in an incredibly large universe. How much could I physically accomplish with these two hands, these 2 feet, this one head? I'm limited. But if I can leverage myself through other people, if I can leverage myself through other people's time and ability and talent, if I can leverage myself through other people's capital and money, if I can leverage myself through other people's resources, I'm a giant. There's nothing I can't do. And why am I putting all this energy into this right now? Well, Jay talked about it earlier. It's called mindset. Because as long as you see yourself in a narrowly defined business, struggling with the day-to-day details of that business, you're going to be stuck there forever. And what I'm going to do this evening is to take you through a process to adapt the way you think about the world and the way you see the world. And from tonight forward, I will guarantee you, you will never see the world the same again. I'm going to take you through an example. With the wrong group, this example is a waste of time. But with this group here tonight, I think it's going to be very valuable. Very short example. My wife and I were having dinner one night at it was late afternoon, and the place was the Boulangerie. It was actually the Pioneer Bakery's Boulangerie. and they had this outdoor cafe. And as we were sitting there eating, we noticed that every once in a while a crumb would fall off of a table, and about 20 or 30 little black birds would come swooping out of the trees and fight each other over that crumb. And then another crumb would fall off a table somewhere down over here, and the same thing would happen again. And my wife's watching this, and she's mystified why all these birds are fighting over this little crumb of food. And she gets really frustrated by it, so what she does, she takes a whole, they had these small loaves of bread, and she takes one of the small loaves off of our bread basket. She peels all the hard crust off of it, so there's nothing left but the nice soft bread. And she takes it and she sets it down in the middle of a walkway between two tables. And she was expecting now this flurry of birds to come out of the tree to peck away at this loaf of bread. And the question I want to ask you is, how many birds do you think swooped down out of the tree and started pecking on that loaf of bread from which they could easily have eaten their fill? None. Absolutely none. It just sat there. And we watched it. Another crumb fell off a table 2 feet down, and the birds are all there fighting over the crumb. And my wife went over, she picked up the piece of bread, she pulverized it in her hands, and she threw all the crumbs out on the ground. And now, 20 or 30 birds flying out of the trees, all there now, gorging themselves on the crumbs. I try and learn a lesson from everything I see in life, because everything you see, everything teaches you something. And I asked myself, what is this teaching me? And I realized what it was teaching me is how many of us spend our lives fighting others over the crumbs when there are whole loaves sitting out there with nobody touching them. And why doesn't it happen? Thank you, thank you. That's for my wife, by the way. If it were not for her, I would not have this story. Okay. You see, the birds has a mindset. Crumbs are bird food. Loaves are people food. It's not for me. And so what happens is they could be surrounded by abundance and they ignore it because they think it's not for them. And what I want to assure you this evening, and this is a little bit of preamble, okay, because I'm going to get into some very meaty stuff here. You're going to walk out of here and you're going to know how do you buy a business when you don't have cash in your pocket. You're going to know how to do that. But I wanted to take the opportunity to just get the right mindset in the room, because what I'm going to take you through right now is going to knock your socks off, because I'm going to show you where all the loaves are, and I'm going to show you how you can get them. One more thing before I get started, and I just want to describe something to you. I want to describe to you a person. And the person is 26 years old. It's a couple of years out of college. No significant business experience in any field, especially in manufacturing. He's broke. His wife has a serious illness. He's behind in his rent. He has bill collectors that call on him constantly. He has no resources, no assets to speak of, no credentials in any field. And the question I'd like to ask you is, what are the chances of that person with bad credit, judgments against him, okay, no experience, no credentials, never managed anything? What's the chances of that person buying, in today's marketplace, a company doing $10 million in sales as a manufacturer, bringing $10 million in sales, bringing about $1 million to the bottom line? What's the chances of that person buying that business? Zero. That's what most people would say. I just described to you me at the age of 26 years old. And I'm going to take you through an example of the first business that I bought. I'm going to show you exactly how I did it with all the odds stacked against me. And today, this technique, I don't even use it anymore because we got so many that are so much better. But I'm taking you back here because this is the genesis of all the creative techniques and strategies and methods that have come since. Because over the last 20 years, I've taught this program to over 300,000 people. And I did something that was a little unusual. I stayed with them. I didn't just teach them and kiss them goodbye. And I interacted with them, and I coached them. And what I found is that some of these people were smarter than me. And they took what I learned, what I taught them, and they tuned it a little bit, tweaked it a little bit. And it was better than what I did. And then I would start teaching that. And then sure enough, another bright person would come along and take that technique and twist it a little more. Until 5 or 6 generations later, it didn't look anything like what it started out to be. And a whole new methodology was invented. So what am I going to do tonight? I'm going to teach you the genesis, what it is that enabled this whole thing. And what it was that enabled a 26-year-old person absolutely at rock bottom, with no experience, no credentials, no cash, bad debt, bad credit, to go buy what today would be the equivalent of a $10 million a year business, manufacturing company. All right, my first business. What did I choose to do? Well, first of all, I picked a business to go into that even though I didn't have any experience in it, it was a field that bordered on something that I loved. And what was it that I loved? I loved motorcycle riding. That's what I would do in any spare time I could find. I'd be out riding my cycle because that was the one place I could forget about all the problems that I had in life. It was the one place nobody could catch me. So I thought I would like to do something in the motorcycle parts industry. I found a business that was for sale. I decided I was going to take a shot at buying it because if there was anybody who had nothing to lose, it was me. I found this company that manufactured a single part for a motorcycle. It was called a front-end fork tube. If you don't know what that is, you can picture the front of a motorbike. You've probably seen people who modify their front ends of their bikes, and all of a sudden it doesn't look anything like the old one did. It has these long front-end fork tubes on the front, that wheel sticking way out there. Well, the original equipment manufacturer won't manufacture anything but their stock sizes for that motorcycle because they don't want it to be unsafe. So if you wanted to modify your front end, you have to go to an aftermarket manufacturer who manufactures those extended front end fork tubes. And I wanted to buy one of those companies, and that's all. The only product they made was front end fork tubes. And I met with the seller, and he responds to all my questions. For example, I asked him, what were the sales of the company? How much profits is it making? He told me the owner's salaries, the perks, the value of the inventory, machinery, equipment, etc. And then he took me on a little tour of the factory. Then I asked him that infamous question, what's the asking price? And he tells me it's $500,000. Now, I'm giving you the numbers as they were, and I just want to remind you, these are in $1972. So that would be the equivalent of about $5 million today in terms of if I wanted to have a relatively the same size company. That would be what I'd be looking at. But in my case, these were the actual numbers. It was $500,000 was the asking price. And what kind of terms does he want? All cash. Well, needless to say, was very disheartening. I literally kind of felt my heart drop. Not that I had any great expectations, mind you, but for $500,000, when a young fellow, 26 years old, who's broke, thinks of $500,000, you're not thinking about money. That's a telephone number, $500,000. But I thanked him for his time. He thanked me for my time and my interest. And I started to walk out the door. And as I was about to the threshold of the door, I turned to him and I said, you know what I'd like to do, Mr. Siller, is I'd like to think about all the information you shared with me today and the price that you want for your company. And I'd like to get back to you in the next week or two with an offer. Is that okay? And he looked at me and said, well, sure. He says, I look forward to seeing what you come back with. So I asked his permission to make an offer, and I left. Well, the next 3 months represented 3 months of my negotiating with the seller. Now, the words 3 months up there are really important. Buying a company is not an event. It's a process. It's a process of you and the seller getting comfortable with each other. Because if you're going to make any kind of a creative offer to a seller, he's not going to be creative with a stranger. He's not going to be creative with somebody he doesn't trust. He's not going to be creative with someone he doesn't like. And so I took this 3 months to build something with that seller that I've since come to call a cosmic bond. Think about this. I'm a young 26-year-old kid. I presume after talking to me, he kind of got it that I had a lot of latent ability, but I sure hadn't proven myself yet. And who was he? He was an 81-year-old man looking to retire who started to see me as the son he never had, who started to look at me as a guy he wanted to take under his wing and train how to run this business his way. He had a bunch of other people offer him money for the company, but they all wanted to change this and do that and change the name, do something to it that he didn't like. When an owner sells his business, he is not selling a commodity. He's selling his child that he has nurtured for 25, 30 years, that he has a great deal of emotional attachment and time tied to that. He sees it as his alter ego. That's him in material form. And an owner cares a lot about who's going to take over that company when he dies or when he retires. Cares a lot. Now, why do I go into all of this length of description here? There's a reason for it. Because most people think a business is a financial transaction. It's money changing hands for assets. And I will tell you that somewhere down the line it becomes that. But the primary transaction is a psychological one. If you cannot connect with the seller on a psychological level, the chances are you can't do the deal. So you got to get up your friendship personality, your most trusted face, your most sincere persona, and you got to wear that every day and remember that this is a process. It's a process of you and the seller getting to know each other, like each other, respect each other, and trust each other. And that way, when you ask him some of the critical questions that are going to come up in a minute, he's more likely to be amenable than not. Well, after spending this 3 months with the seller, negotiating with him, the seller finally agrees that he's going to sell me the company, or he will sell me the company. Purchase price is going to be $500,000. That's what he wanted for the company. He was firm on it. But he agreed to be flexible in terms of the terms. He said he would take $150,000 as cash down, and then the $350,000, he would take that in the form of a note payable over 15 years. Well, that's pretty good. Now, the note can be paid out of earnings from the business. Okay, I did all the math. I went through all the numbers of the earnings of the company. I looked at how much cash flow there'd be, and I figured out that this note could be paid off out of profit. So there's no problem with me paying the note. In fact, I could have profit left over. What's the problem? What am I worried about? Yeah. Where am I going to get $150,000 cash down? I described my circumstances to you. I mean, that's still a telephone number, just a different exchange. But I did some research. I had a lot of time, 3 months to work on this. And I found out that there are such a thing out there called asset-based lenders. Now, you may not know what an asset-based lender is, but you really do, because if anybody's ever bought a car, you have used an asset-based lender. Okay? And what you bought was an asset where the asset you bought was the collateral for the loan that helped you buy it. That's an asset-based loan. The strength of the loan is really on the asset, because if you don't pay them, what are they going to do? You know, they'd like you to have a good income, they'd like you to have a good credit rating and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, if you don't pay them, what do? They come in, they scarf up their collateral, they sell it, and for the most part, they're going to get their money back. So the risk is very low to this asset-based lender, because it's the asset itself that's standing behind the loan. The asset serves as the collateral for the loan that helps you buy it. An asset-based lender to a business will take almost any business asset and loan you money against it. They'll take cars and trucks, machinery, equipment, inventory, accounts receivable, land, buildings, almost any business asset. Now, in this company that I wanted to buy for a total purchase price of $500,000, there was $300,000 worth of machinery and equipment and accounts receivable at liquidation value. And I found an asset-based lender that once I owned the business would loan me up to 80% of the liquidation value, or $240,000. But what do I have to be to get that loan? I got to be the owner. And what's standing between me and being the owner of that business? $150,000. You see, you got the picture. I mean, it's really clear. All right. It's $150,000 that I didn't have. Well, it was time for more research. I found out that I could go to a bank and get a swing loan. Anybody here ever hear of a swing loan before? Sure, you've heard of these things. I could borrow $150,000 in the morning, give that to the seller. That would make the business mine. Then in the afternoon, pledge the assets in the business I just bought to the asset-based lender, raise $240,000 from them, and repay the bank their $150,000, and I would have $90,000 left over in the company that I could then use for working capital to actually build the company. Wow. When I figured that out, man, I thought I got it. All right. It wasn't quite that easy. But here are the numbers. Okay, we got a $500,000 purchase price. We got $350,000 that's going to be paid of that in a note to the seller. We're going to come up with $150,000 of cash down. We're going to get that from a swing loan, and the swing loan is going to get paid off from an asset-based loan of $240,000, and it's going to leave us $90,000 in the bank. Okay, so those are the numbers. Okay, $1,972. I always want to remind you that, because the numbers get bigger, but this is the size of the company it was. I went to the Bank of America in Century City, California, and I sat down across the table from the loan office, the senior loan officer at the bank. And he's sitting there behind that big oak desk, right? Sitting there in that high, backed, overstuffed chair. Sitting back, you know, hands like this, right? And he's listening to my great explanation of what I want to do and how I'm going to pay him back and all that stuff. And then when I'm finished, he leans across the table and he looks at me over the top of his horn-rimmed glasses and he says to me, "Now, son, you don't seriously think that we could loan you $150,000? Why, you don't have any kind of credit rating with us that would even remotely warrant that amount of loan. So it's a great plan that you have here, but I'm sorry, we can't help." Well, banker turns me down. But I knew he was going to turn me down, because I knew how bad my credit was. I knew I was a young kid who didn't have the credentials. I knew all that stuff. So I made the banker a promise. And here's the promise that I made him. I was going to pay him a full month's interest on his one-day loan. He's going to have no risk because the money's never going to leave his bank. And the loan's going to get paid off the same instant that it's made. And when it's all done, he'll have $90,000 of my money in a checking account there at his bank on which he pays me nothing. And he can loan my money out to his other customers and charge them interest on my money and keep it. That doesn't sound too bad, does it? If I can do this with no risk to the bank, the money never leaves his hands, and he gets $90,000 more that he can put in a checking account and loan out to other people and make money on me, that doesn't sound too bad. Well, how fast do you think he ran for the loan forms? At that point, darn near broke both legs. And let me show you how we set it up. What I'm explaining to you is the basic structure of a full leverage buyout. This has a name. It's called a full leverage buyout. And basically, what we're going to do is we're going to set up two rooms at his bank. Now over here on my left, we're going to call that room A, and over there on the right, we're going to call that room B. And on the day of the closing, there are three people sitting here in room A. There's the seller, the buyer, and the banker. And sitting on the table in front of us are all the documents that are required to legally transfer ownership of the business from the seller to me, the buyer. And so the documents are signed, the seller and I exchange our copies, and at that moment, the banker hands me a cashier's check for $150,000 made payable to the seller. I take the check, I hand it to the seller, and when I hand that seller the check and my hand lets go of it, what's true? Deal's done, right? I am now the legal owner of that business. And sitting over here in room B are two more people. And in front of them are documents sitting on a table that I signed before I went into room A. But I signed them as if I was the owner of the business. And those documents were the UCC filings and the loan agreements and the note and everything that that asset-based lender would need to perfect his lien on those assets once I was the owner and he made the loan. So when my hand let go of the check in room A, I became the owner. So at that moment,